If you're so smart, convince him to sign it. Jacob Stanton didn't lower his voice. He never did. His tone sliced through the soft clatter of silverware and murmured conversations filling the elegant morning bustle of the Willow Room, one of Atlanta's finest hotel restaurants. Linen napkins, polished cutlery, and attentive waitstaff kept everything moving in smooth choreography. But at table 12, things had come to a sudden halt. Maya Williams stood beside the booth, notepad still in hand. Her eyebrows raised slightly, not in offense, but in calm calculation. She hadn't meant to provoke him. She was just refilling his water when she happened to glance at the stack of documents he'd dropped on the table with a grunt. Her eye caught a line something about unilateral breach rights, buried deep in subsection 7C, and she'd spoken before she could stop herself. That clause, she had said, pointing, sounds like it gives them a back door to pull out without notice. Isn't that risky in a merger? Jacob had looked up, startled, then narrowed his eyes. Then came the mockery. Now every table near them had gone quiet. Maya didn't flinch. She shifted her weight onto one foot, looking down at the man in the custom navy suit, who had just broadcast his condescension to the room. "You're right, Mr. Stanton," she said evenly. "I'm a waitress, but contracts don't care what I wear. And that clause is why your Japanese partners won't sign." His lips tightened, jaw twitching as he leaned forward. "You know why they won't sign?" "I can guess," she replied. "That clause gives them all the leverage while leaving you exposed. And in Section 9F, there's a delay clause tied to ambiguous environmental compliance too broad, too vague. It's a legal stall tactic. They'll keep postponing until you bleed liquidity." You read that? In 30 seconds? "No," Maya said, folding her notepad and slipping her pen into her apron pocket. "I read that because I've seen the same trick before. In a different contract, different language, same power play." Jacob looked up at her again. Really looked, this time. Maya was dressed in the crisp black and white uniform required by the hotel, modest blouse, dark slacks, hair pulled back into a neat bun. She blended in perfectly with the service, except for her eyes. They held a quiet intensity, the kind of gaze that didn't ask permission to think. The hum of the restaurant returned, but fainter now, as if even the walls were curious what might happen next. Jacob reached out and flipped a page of the contract, scanning it quickly, then again, slower. His frown deepened. "You said you'd seen this before?" Maya nodded once. "I studied law, Spelman College. I didn't finish. Life got in the way. But I've worked in enough rooms, Silent, in the background watching deals fall apart. I notice things." He tapped his fingers against the paper. His mind was clearly racing, but the edge in his tone was softening. "You think that's the only reason they're holding off?" "No," she said. "I think they don't trust the intent behind the language. You're offering partnership, but the contract screams domination. No one signs with a gun pointed at their foot." He leaned back, lips parted slightly. For the first time that morning, Jacob Stanton said nothing. Maya took a step back. "Your server will be with you shortly. Enjoy your breakfast." She turned, already moving toward the kitchen doors when his voice followed her. "Wait." She stopped but didn't turn around yet. Jacob stood up. He wasn't smiling, but something in his face had changed, like he had glimpsed a map he never knew he needed. "Miss William," he said carefully, "I'm going to be honest. That was unexpected. I don't usually take advice from people I've just met, especially not over Eggs Benedict." Maya gave a polite nod, still guarded. "But I need this deal, and if you see what my entire legal team missed." He hesitated, then continued. "I need someone who can help me fix it. Quietly, quickly. Would you consider working with Megist until this contract gets signed?" The kitchen door flapped once, then settled. Maya turned back to him slowly. Her voice was calm, but resolute. "I'll consider it, but not as your assistant." Jacob blinked. "If I do this," she said, "I'm your advisor. Equal say. No coffee runs." A pause. Then he nodded. "Deal." And in that moment, Maya wasn't just defending a contract clause, she was defending her dignity. A waitress who dared to lift her head among the powerful and say, "I'm your advisor. Equal footing." Tap like to support Maya's courage and confidence. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching this from. Who knows? Someone nearby might be following her journey too, just like you are. Jacob Stanton didn't usually second-guess himself, especially not before 9 a.m. But as he sat across from Maya William in a quiet, private conference room one floor above the breakfast lounge, he found himself glancing at her more than the contract in front of them. The shift had been fast, too fast for someone like him. Less than an hour ago, she had been taking orders. Now, she sat across the polished table, her blazer newly buttoned over her work uniform, sleeves rolled up as she scribbled notes in a legal pad she'd borrowed from one of his assistants. The air was hushed, the lights warm and indirect, the coffee on the side table untouched. "I have questions about this clause," Maya said, her pen tapping against paragraph 12A. "Your team worded it to appear neutral, but it contradicts the indemnification agreement in section 15. You're basically guaranteeing coverage on both sides, which makes you liable regardless of fault." Jacob leaned in. "How the hell did they get that past my people?" "They didn't. They probably flagged it. But you were under pressure. You needed the deal to move forward, and someone told you it was standard language." He let out a breath and sat back, rubbing a hand along his jaw. Maya continued. "There's also an unusual insertion under the environmental provision. Your Japanese partners are extremely sensitive about compliance due to their national regulations. This clause reads like it's hiding something. Even if it's unintentional, it creates a perception of bad faith." Perception? In mergers, perception is everything. They don't trust this language. If I were them, I wouldn't sign either. Jacob frowned. "So, what's the solution?" "First, you clean up the language. Transparent terms, mutual protection, capped liability. Second, and more importantly, you show them who's actually running point on this deal." His eyebrows lifted. "Meaning?" "Let me lead the negotiation call tomorrow," she said. "You can be there, of course, but let me speak." Jacob didn't respond immediately. He studied her. She had removed her apron earlier, tied her braids back tighter, and her posture was no longer that of a waitress. It was of someone who knew what the stakes were and had nothing to lose. "You know they'll question your credentials. They won't get the chance. I'll speak their language literally. I minored in Japanese, and I know how to listen better than talk." Jacob chuckled once, softly. "I don't know what to make of you, Miss William." "You don't have to," she replied. "Just let me help you not make $100 million mistake." He looked back at the papers, then, reluctantly, nodded. "Fine, but you're not going in alone. I want you fully briefed by legal before the call." "I'll brief them," Maya said without blinking. "If I let them lead, we're right back where we started. Un moment passed. Acquiesce. Mutual understanding." "I'll have a temporary consultant badge issued," Jacob said, "and your name's going on the calendar invite. But if you crash this call—" "I won't," she cut in, gathering the papers. "But if I do, I promise you'll be the first to know." By noon, Maya was seated in a quiet corner of Stanton Holdings' legal department, a borrowed office with a view of the Atlanta skyline. A junior associate had been tasked with bringing her everything related to the deal mails, early drafts, flagged revisions. The associate, a nervous man named Eric, stammered through his explanation of the deal's timeline. Maya listened, took notes, and then calmly asked him to pull up the first version of the indemnity clause. She compared it to the final. The shift in tone was subtle but telling a lawyer's sleight of hand. "You changed counsel midway through drafting?" she asked. Eric blinked. Yes. The client rep from Japan requested a more collaborative tone, so we looped in an outside firm. And they softened the language? They said it would make the agreement more palatable." Maya shook her head. "No, they reworded it to put all the burden back on Stanton Holdings. You handed the other side a velvet-covered knife." Eric turned pale. "Should I notify someone?" "No," Maya said calmly. "Let me handle it." By the time 3 p.m. rolled around, she had redrafted 3 sections and annotated 24 clauses. She cross-referenced them with Japanese corporate governance principles and even flagged a cultural misstep in the risk disclosure and image in a presentation deck that subtly contradicted the value of harmony, emphasized in Japanese. Business etiquette. At 4 p.m., Jacob reappeared. He didn't bother knocking. "You're still here," he said, mildly surprised. "I told you," she said without looking up. "I don't leave when the work's half done." He walked in and shut the door behind him. "Legal says you scared the hell out of my junior associate. I just showed him where the math didn't add up." Jacob dropped into the chair across from her. "We've got a call at 10 tomorrow morning, Tokyo time. That's 9 p.m. here. I'll be ready." He hesitated, then asked something he hadn't planned to say. "Why do you care?" Maya finally looked up. "Because too many men like you sit in rooms like this and never see people like me unless we're serving you eggs. And because if I fix this, it changes things for both of us." Jacob stared at her. He didn't argue. That night, Maya didn't go home. She stayed at the office, reviewing translation notes and running through legal phrasing in Japanese. At 11:43 p.m., the cleaning staff passed by and paused, noticing a woman in slacks and a white shirt, hair tied back, reading contracts under lamplight. She wasn't a waitress here. Not anymore. And tomorrow, the world would know it. At 8:57 p.m., Stanton Holdings' main conference room was washed in low golden light, the skyline of Atlanta a mosaic of glass and steel behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. The table was cleared except for a single laptop, one legal pad, a glass of still water, and Maya William. She sat poised, hands folded, her expression steady. She wore a simple navy blazer over a clean white blouse, hair pulled back, and a touch of gloss on her lips. She wasn't trying to impress. She was trying to be unmistakably clear. Jacob Stanton stood a few paces away, arms crossed, watching her not with the skepticism of yesterday, but with a cautious, unspoken hope. He had called off his legal team for this call, not because they weren't capable, but because Maya had spotted what none of them had. And whether he liked it or not, she was the closest thing to a bridge he had left. "Maya," he said, glancing at the clock, "you've got exactly 1 hour. No slides, no team, no PR fluff. They're expecting results." I'm not giving them anything they don't already know," she said, eyes fixed on the screen. "I'm just going to say it in a way they can hear." At 9 p.m. sharp, the video call connected. 3 windows appeared on the screen, each showing a representative from Tokyo. All wore dark suits, seated in impeccably minimalist offices. At the center was Mr. Hayashi, the soft-spoken but firm CFO of Senzaki Global, a man known for patience, silence, and scrutiny. "Good morning," Maya began in formal Japanese. "I am Maya William, speaking today on behalf of Stanton Holdings. I appreciate your time and will be brief." There was a moment of pause, not disrespectful, cultural. Maya waited, letting them settle. "I'd like to begin by acknowledging the discomfort the current agreement has created. The language in several key clauses does not reflect the spirit of partnership this deal was intended to promote. That was a failure on our part, and I'd like to walk you through revisions we believe restore both clarity and trust." Mr. Hayashi's expression did not change, but he gave a slight nod. Maya continued, flipping open her pad. Section 7C, termination upon environmental failure, was reworded this morning to include third-party verification prior to enforcement. Section 12 now includes mutual indemnity, aligning risk responsibly on both sides. And Section 18, which previously left escrow undefined, is now capped and scheduled in phases, easing financial tension. She paused. "What we propose isn't a new deal. It's the one you agreed to, just without the traps, without the ambiguity, with honor." A few beats passed in silence. Jacob didn't breathe. Maya's voice hadn't wavered once, even as her hand rested lightly on the table, fingertips tapping a silent rhythm. Then Mr. Hayashi leaned forward. "Miss William," he said in deliberate English, "we received these revisions an hour ago. They are cleaner, direct. They're also transparent," Maya replied, switching back to Japanese. "No fine print to bury trust." The others on the screen exchanged glances. A woman to Hayashi's left scribbled something on a notepad. The third executive, an older man with a square face, narrowed his eyes. "May I ask," he said in Japanese, "what is your title?" Maya didn't blink. "Advisor. For now." The old man smiled, the first sign of warmth on the call. Hayashi looked back into the camera. "We are not accustomed to such clarity in these dealings." "I'm not accustomed to being invited to the table," Maya said. "We're both seeing something new today." Another pause. Then Hayashi offered a crisp nod. "We will sign, contingent on these revisions being formalized by legal before end of business tomorrow." Maya bowed slightly. "You have my word." The screen flickered. Call ended. Jacob let out a long breath and broke the silence. What the hell just happened? You got your deal, Maya said, slowly rising from her seat. And I got 5 hours of sleep to catch up on. He stared at her as she moved to gather her pad. Number, you didn't just get the deal. You turned a disaster into respect. She turned to face him. That was always on the table. You just had the wrong people sitting at it. Jacob walked to the window, looking out at the city, then turned back. I want you full-time. Maya raised an eyebrow. Yesterday I was just good with coffee. Today I'm full-time? He smiled, the kind of smile that knew it had been caught out. Fair, but I know talent when I see it. She didn't respond right away. Jacob added, we're building a new division community-focused innovation. I want someone who knows both sides, who sees the loopholes and the people falling through them. Maya studied him. She wasn't naive. She knew what kind of world this was, the sudden respect, the quick offers, the performative enthusiasm once someone proved their worth. But this felt different. Not perfect, not safe, but real. I don't want a desk near the window, she said. I want autonomy, input, and I don't clean up other people's messes unless I get to stop them from happening in the first place. Jacob nodded. Done. She gave a single nod and stepped toward the door. Also, she added over her shoulder, I'm keeping my shifts at the diner, at least for now. Why? He asked. She smiled. Because that table taught me more about people than any boardroom ever could. She exited the room without another word, leaving Jacob Stanton standing in the middle of a conference room that, for once, had no agenda on the wall and no lies in the margins. He looked back at the laptop, then at the pad she'd left on the table, still open to her final bullet point. Trust is not a clause, it's a choice. And for the first time in years, Jacob made it. It had been 3 days since the call with Tokyo, and Maya Williams still hadn't taken the consultant badge Jacob Stanton had ordered for her. She kept it tucked inside her tote bag, along with a half-read copy of Black Women, Black Justice and her battered notepad, its pages now blooming with sketches of organizational flowcharts, contract rewrites, and bullet point reminders scrawled during coffee breaks. Every morning, she walked into Stanton Holdings not through the glass main entrance like the suits, but through the side cafe next door, grabbed a small Americano, waved to the doorman who remembered her from the diner days, and rode the elevator up alone. Jacob had cleared out a glass-walled office on the same floor as legal mid-level. Nothing flashy, but it had a door that closed, a working printer, and a whiteboard that she filled within 48 hours. On the 4th morning, she arrived to find a sticky note on her desk. Jacob wants a briefing on the hiring protocol draft. Noon. Bring the fire. Alyssa, exec assistant. Maya smirked. Stanton Holdings wasn't just shifting its contracts, it was shifting its lens, and it was starting with who got to sit in the room. The community-focused innovation division was still unofficial, but Jacob had told her to treat it as real, and she had. By noon, she stood in a smaller boardroom, laptop open, facing Jacob and 3 others, Hannah Lynn, a lead counsel from legal, Roberto Vega, head of strategy, and Serena Boyd, head of HR, who looked as if she'd rather be anywhere else. Let's keep this short, Serena said. The last 2 hires Maya flagged as non-traditional candidates didn't pass background. Maya didn't flinch. They passed intelligence, resilience, and situational ethics. They failed bureaucratic red tape written for a different world. Jacob, seated at the head, said nothing. His eyes were on Maya, not his screen. Hannah cut in gently. We understand your perspective, Maya. But legally, I know the law, Maya said calmly. I just also know how it's weaponized. She clicked to the next slide. This isn't about charity hiring or good optics. This is about competitive advantage. Our competitors are hiring from Ivy League pools. That's fine. But the future isn't just found in polished resumes. It's found in grit. She pointed to the data she'd spent the past 2 nights compiling, performance comparisons of traditional hires versus those with GEDs, trade backgrounds, or second-chance employment records. The hires you're worried about, they outperform their counterparts in retention, loyalty, and internal referrals. Why? Because they know what a second chance feels like. Serena crossed her arms. It's risky. Maya's gaze didn't move. So is staying comfortable. Jacob cleared his throat. I asked Maya to lead this initiative because she sees what I didn't. We're not fixing a company. We're rebuilding how it listens. The room went quiet. Then Jacob added, "And if that makes us slower to act, then so be it. But if Maya says someone's worth looking at, I'm going to look." Maya gave him a silent nod of acknowledgement. When the meeting broke, she gathered her materials and was heading for the elevator when Roberto caught up to her. "You speak like someone who's done this before," he said. She smiled. "I've watched it from the margins long enough." He looked at her. "You're not still working shifts at the diner, are you?" "I am." "Why?" "Because it reminds me what ambition sounds like when it hasn't been heard yet." That night, after hours, Maya returned to her new office and unlocked a drawer she hadn't touched yet. Inside was a folder paper, no digital files. Notes from her final year at Spelman before she dropped out. Contracts and ethics. A half-written paper about implicit bias in employment law. She spread them on the desk, exhaled slowly, then began writing again. This time, not for a grade but for something real. As she worked, a ping sounded. An email from Jacob. Subject: New case study lead. Body: We've got a legacy client pulling out due to cultural alignment concerns. It's code. You know it. I know it. Can you lead the restructure? They won't like it, but they'll respect it if it works. Also, I think it's time you picked a title. Advisor doesn't cut it anymore. She stared at the screen, fingers hovering, then typed back. Reply: Give me the file, and call me Director of Equitable Strategy. She hit send, then leaned back, finally slipping the badge from her bag and pinning it to her blazer. Maya William. Director. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she built the seat no one offered. And now that she had it, she wasn't about to let it go. The legacy client's office was all polished steel and glass, perched on the top floor of a downtown tower that looked down on the city like it didn't quite belong to it. Maya Williams stepped into the sleek reception at 9:02 a.m., flanked by a junior strategist and a compliance rep, neither of whom had stopped looking nervous since they got in the elevator. She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. The receptionist greeted them with polite professionalism, eyes flicking briefly to the name on Maya's badge. Director of Equitable Strategy. The title was still fresh, but it sat comfortably on her like a jacket she'd worn in dreams long before it was real. The client Hartwell and Mason Capital had been one of Stanton Holdings' oldest partners. They weren't loud or controversial. But over the past 6 months, their emails had become distant, their calls less frequent. And then last week, a line buried in a formal memo. We are concerned the direction of your new hiring and cultural narrative is incompatible with our brand ethos. Code. Always code. The meeting room they were ushered into was oversized, with a long conference table made of dark walnut and a full breakfast tray untouched at one end. Across the table sat 3 executives, all white, all in navy suits, and all carrying the look of people expecting to be agreed with. Maya sat down calmly. She didn't shuffle papers, didn't clear her throat. She simply folded her hands in front of her and began. I understand you have concerns about the direction Stanton Holdings is taking. One of the men, Harold Mason himself, leaned forward with the weight of authority earned over decades. Our concern, Miss William, is that in your attempt to redefine corporate equity, your company may be undermining operational consistency and reliability. Maya nodded once, slowly. Would you mind clarifying which policies you feel undermine reliability? Well, take your new hiring model. Another executive, said this one younger, sharper, but clearly rehearsed. You've lowered formal degree requirements for managerial tracks. You've onboarded second-chance applicants with criminal records. You've diverted training funds into community partnerships. All of which, Maya replied smoothly, have increased our retention by 18% and cut onboarding costs by 1/3. The room was silent for a moment. Harold cleared his throat. It's not just metrics, Miss William. It's brand alignment. Our clients expect us to partner with companies that project professionalism and tradition. Maya's smile was polite but thin. Mr. Mason, respectfully, when you say tradition, do you mean consistency or comfort? He stiffened slightly. We believe in cultural cohesion, and, candidly, some of your recent hires and public statements haven't inspired confidence. There it was. No more code. Just barely enough veneer to keep it civil. Maya opened a folder and slid a document across the table. Here are the updated quarterly reports you didn't request. you'll find that the teams under our new initiative outperformed projections by 22%, including the division led by a man you declined to mentor 6 years ago because of his community college background. The younger exec looked down, visibly startled. Maya continued. I also attached internal audit logs showing 0 compliance violations under the new division, and 2 prior under the old system, both under managers considered traditional by your criteria. Harold didn't reach for the paper. You're very well prepared. I have to be, Maya said softly, because when you look like me and come from where I do, being underprepared isn't an option, it's a death sentence for opportunity. She looked around the room, her tone steady. What you call misalignment, I call evolution. The market is changing. Expectations are changing. And the companies that refuse to grow will be the ones left behind, not the ones trying to lead forward. Silence thickened. Finally, Harold leaned back in his chair. So you're not here to ask us to stay. I'm here to give you the facts, Maya said. You can walk away if you want, but understand this train is moving, and we're not stopping to apologize for getting everyone a seat. He looked at her for a long time, then said, not unkindly, you speak with conviction. Maya nodded once. Because I've lived the consequences of silence. As the meeting ended, there was no handshake, just polite nods and tight expressions. But as Maya walked out, her junior strategist Connor caught up to her, eyes wide. You just told one of our biggest clients to keep up or get out. No, she said, pressing the elevator button. I just told them the truth. Whether they stay or not, that's their decision. But they won't say they weren't warned. Back at headquarters, Jacob was waiting in the hallway outside her office. He looked up as she approached. You handled it. They're either going to pivot quietly, she said, or try to smear us on the way out. Either way, I put the facts on the table. He handed her a folder. Another legacy client. Similar tone. Want to take this one too? She took it but didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, you need to stop treating this like a series of exceptions. What you're building here, it's not an experiment anymore. It's your foundation. Jacob nodded slowly. You're right. And if we're going to build something that lasts, she added, we're going to need more than facts. We're going to need stories. Proof that change works not just in charts, but in lives. He looked at her. You thinking PR? I'm thinking legacy, Maya said. The kind that doesn't hang on donor walls. The kind they talk about in neighborhoods that don't usually read the business section. Jacob smiled. It wasn't smug. It was grounded. Let's build it. And for the first time, Maya felt like the blueprint wasn't just in her hands, it was her hands. Everything she'd been shut out from, everything that had once whispered, not for you, now lay ahead. And this time, she would write the story they'd have to listen to. On the second Saturday of April, Maya William found herself standing in front of a group of high school seniors packed into the community hall of St. Emmanuel Baptist Church. The room smelled faintly of old varnish and fresh muffins, and the folding chairs were filled with students from the kind of neighborhoods Maya had grown up in. Sharp eyes, restless knees, and more skepticism than hope. She didn't bring slides. No printed bios, no corporate banners. Just her notepad, a black marker, and the title, Director of Equitable Strategy, scribbled on a name tag someone had made for her at the last minute. I'm not here to tell you to dream big, she said, pacing slowly in front of the rows. I'm here to tell you that dreaming is the easy part. It's what comes after the dream gets stepped on that really counts. A girl in the front row, braids, glasses, expression locked in, practiced indifference, crossed her arms. Maya saw her, saw herself. You're going to hear a lot of things in the next few years, Maya continued. That you're too young, too inexperienced, too loud, too quiet, too black, too angry, too soft. The world has a long list of reasons to dismiss you. Your job is not to make that list shorter. It's to keep walking anyway. She told them how she'd started at Spelman, how her mother got sick, how she'd worked double shifts to keep the lights on, how she'd walked away from school, not because she wasn't capable, but because surviving had to come first. And then, she said, stopping in front of the girl with the glasses, I spent years waiting tables, watching lawyers scribble notes on napkins, hearing CEOs mutter under their breath about clauses they didn't understand. I watched the whole machine. From the bottom up. The girl raised an eyebrow. So you just waited your turn? Maya smiled. No, I built my own damn table. The room broke into quiet laughter, the kind that held recognition. Later, as the students filed out, some stopping to shake her hand, others just nodding, Maya stood near the exit, catching breaths, catching thoughts. One boy lingered behind. He was maybe 17, tall, thin, wore his hoodie like a shield. "You said you read contracts while serving coffee," he said. "That real?" "Every word," Maya replied. "My mom cleans buildings at night. She memorizes English grammar rules off cereal boxes." Maya looked him in the eyes. "Then she's more educated than half the room in most board meetings." He nodded, then handed her a folded paper. A poem, written in uneven but passionate lines. "I wrote this after my dad got deported," he said quietly. "I don't let people read it, but you might understand it." Maya accepted it with both hands. "I will read every word." That night, back in her apartment, she sat at the kitchen table, light dim, fridge humming, and read the boy's poem 3 times. She didn't cry, not because it wasn't moving, but because it was too raw, too real, the kind of real that bypassed tears and went straight to the ribs. She opened her laptop and began typing. The next morning, Maya presented the Legacy Stories initiative to Jacob and the executive team minus the usual suits and fluff. "We've been talking about transformation in numbers," she said. "It's time we start talking in people." She proposed a series of public profiles, short, powerful stories of Stanton Holdings' non-traditional hires, community partnerships, and most of all, the voices behind those decisions. Janitors turned analysts, teen mothers turned coders, mechanics turned data engineers. Not for press, for permanence. "We're not marketing this," she said. "We're archiving it. For every kid who thinks power belongs to someone else." There were questions, concerns, but Jacob nodded. "Let's do it." Within 2 weeks, Maya was conducting interviews, not with press credentials, but with purpose. She sat in warehouses, community kitchens, and quiet homes. She asked about loss, about luck, about learning things the hard way, and she listened deeply. Then one afternoon, she visited a small field office in South Atlanta where one of their logistics leads, a woman named Bernice Tucker, had started a program teaching women recently released from incarceration how to manage supply chains. Bernice was 52, with a gold tooth, a booming laugh, and eyes that had seen everything. After their interview, Bernice leaned across the break room table. "You know what's wild, baby?" she said. "I did 12 years for a mistake I made at 22. But this company gave me a chance, and now I get to tell these girls. Your worst moment doesn't get to be your whole story." Maya didn't speak. She just squeezed Bernice's hand. That night, she wrote a new headline on the first profile draft. "The story doesn't end where they left you." Jacob read it the next morning and didn't change a word. The first legacy story went live on the company's internal portal. Then it spread quietly, then virally. Employees forwarded it to families. Clients who had once voiced concerns started asking how they could implement something similar. One board member wrote Jacob an email that simply said, "This feels like a company I want to be proud of again." Maya watched it all unfold with cautious clarity. The work was far from done. There were still people whispering that she was a temporary disruption, a symbol, a fluke. But she knew better. Symbols fade, systems stick, and now she was building both. Late that evening, standing at her window, Maya opened the boy's poem again. She had memorized it by now. She picked up her phone and typed out a text to Jacob. "Let's make room for youth voices in legacy stories. Maybe start with poetry." He replied 1 minute later. "Print budget's yours. You lead it." She smiled, the city stretching out in front of her, dusk softening the skyline. In a world that had once handed her silence, Maya William was writing a new language. And this time, she wasn't asking to be heard. She was making herself unforgettable. The invitation arrived on thick, cream-colored cardstock, hand-delivered to Maya's office early Monday morning. Embossed in deep navy ink was a gold-foiled emblem, the Mid-Atlantic Corporate Leadership Summit. She flipped the envelope open with her thumb, brows slightly raised. Stanton Holdings had been invited to deliver the keynote at the summit for the first time in a decade in honor, typically reserved for companies with billion-dollar valuations and spotless reputations. But what made Maya pause wasn't the logo or the gold trim. It was the final line at the bottom. Keynote speaker, Maya William, Director of Equitable Strategy. She stared at it for a long moment. No Jacob Stanton. No legal head. No PR officer. Her. She set the card down slowly and leaned back in her chair. The sunlight was streaming in through the blinds, casting sharp white lines across her notepad. When Jacob arrived an hour later with 2 coffees in hand, she didn't look up right away. "I see you got the envelope," he said, setting one of the cups beside her. "You signed off on this?" "I pushed for it." Maya blinked. "Why?" "Because you didn't just fix a contract or save a client. You've changed the way we think, the way we move. People listen to you not because of the title, but because of the truth you carry." She tilted her head. "You know the kind of scrutiny this will bring." He sat across from her, exhaling. "Yes, and we're ready for it." Maya picked up the invitation again. Her fingers moved across the lettering, then stopped. "If I do this, I'm not giving them a safe speech." Jacob smiled. "I wouldn't want you to." The day of the summit, Maya stood backstage behind a rich velvet curtain. The ballroom beyond was filled with more than 600 attendees, executives, investors, lawmakers, and media. On stage, the speaker before Hera's seasoned CEO was wrapping up a glossy, data-heavy presentation about quarterly returns and global expansion. It was polished. It was forgettable. The applause was courteous but lukewarm. Maya adjusted the lapel of her suit. It was navy, simple, and sharp. No jewelry except for a silver pin her mother once gave her. She stepped onto the stage as the moderator called her name. The spotlight hit hard at first, but she didn't flinch. She walked to the podium, took a beat, then looked directly at the audience. "When I was 15, she began, "I watched my mother sign a loan agreement she didn't understand. A week later, we lost our apartment." The room went still. She didn't lack intelligence. She lacked someone willing to translate power into language she could hold. Maya's voice was steady, warm, and undeniable. "Years later, I poured coffee for men who negotiated $100 million deals while pretending people like me didn't exist. I didn't interrupt them. I listened. I watched. And then one day, I saw a clause that didn't belong. I spoke, and everything changed." She told them about the Tokyo deal, about the diner, about walking into Stanton Holdings as someone nobody expected to matter. "But here's the thing," she said. "The system wasn't broken. It was built this way by design. And if we want new results, we don't just need new faces at the table. We need new hands writing the blueprint." There was a tension in the air now, not discomfort, engagement. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for clarity. For companies to stop measuring worth by degrees alone. For leaders to stop confusing polish with potential. For all of us to remember that brilliance is not exclusive to boardrooms." She let the silence sit, then added, "Your next CFO might be stocking shelves right now. Your best strategist might be driving a city bus. And if you're too proud or too blind to look outside your filtered networks, then the future will pass you by while you sip wine at closed-door retreats." A few people shifted in their chairs, but many leaned forward. Maya softened her tone. "This isn't about guilt. It's about growth, and it starts with asking better questions, hiring with better vision, and leading with enough humility to say, 'I don't know who's out there, but I'm ready to find out.'" The applause came slowly, then surged. It wasn't the polite kind. It was the kind that rose from the chest and carried weight. Later, as she stepped off stage, several executives came to shake her hand. A few whispered that her words had shaken something loose in them. One even asked for help restructuring their entire hiring process. Back at the hotel later that night, Maya sat alone in her room, her shoes kicked off, suit jacket folded neatly over the armchair. The city buzzed faintly through the windows. Her phone vibrated beside her. A text from Mama Joyce. "Watch the speech. I stood up in my living room. Twice." Maya smiled, then opened another message. This one from the boy who'd given her the poem. "Saw you on YouTube. Everyone in my English class watched. My teacher cried." She stared at the screen for a long time, then replied simply, "You were the first story. Thank you for letting me carry it." The next morning, Stanton Holdings' homepage featured a new headline. Not about profits, not about expansion, We don't just open doors, we change who gets to build them. Beneath it, a photo of Maya at the podium mid-sentence, hand lifted, eyes clear. It wasn't just a speech. It was a shift, and she was only getting started. A week after the summit, Maya William was invited to speak at a private roundtable hosted by the Department of Labor. It was a quiet, high-stakes event, no cameras, no press, just a dozen policymakers, nonprofit leaders, and a few CEOs hand-picked from the corporate world to help shape a new national workforce initiative. When she walked into the old government building in D.C., she wasn't wearing designer heels or accompanied by a publicist. She wore her same navy blazer, her same sensible shoes, and carried the same beat-up notepad filled with underlined quotes and names of people no one in that room had likely ever met. The room itself was modest wood-paneled walls, a faded seal above the door, and a round mahogany table with worn edges from years of elbows and disagreements. Maya took her seat between a senator from Illinois and a manufacturing magnate who hadn't smiled once since she arrived. The topic was equitable hiring. The tone was cautiously optimistic. The mood was skeptical. They asked questions about scalability, about risk, about compliance costs, about liability insurance when hiring people with non-traditional backgrounds. Maya let them talk. She listened, until the third time someone referred to high-risk hires as statistical anomalies. Then she spoke. "I understand the concern," she said, folding her hands. "But let's stop pretending the risk is them. The risk is us sitting in rooms like this, believing that potential only looks one way, talks one way, or shows up with a certain kind of resume." She looked around the table. "Do you know what happens when someone's name doesn't match your comfort zone? They get discarded by an algorithm, not even a persona algorithm." The senator cleared his throat. "But surely there has to be a vetting process." "There is," Maya said. "And it's already harder for them than for anyone in this room ever imagined. What they need isn't a handout. It's a damn window." A long pause followed. Then a quiet voice from the corner. A woman from a mid-sized trucking company in Ohio. "I hired a woman 2 years ago, felony record. No degree, but brilliant with logistics. She now runs my night shift warehouse. Never missed a day." What Maya's saying, it's not theory. Heads slowly turned toward her. Maya looked down at her notes. "Then back up. If you want policy that works, you need to build it around the people who've actually lived outside the system, not just those who've studied it. Otherwise, you're not drafting policy. You're writing fiction." When the roundtable ended, several members stayed behind to speak with her. One staffer quietly slipped her a card. "We'd love to have you consult on language for our upcoming bill." Later that evening, she walked the National Mall alone. She didn't post anything, didn't take photos. She just breathed it in the silence, the gravity, the long road she'd taken to get here. The next morning, she was back in Atlanta before sunrise. She went straight from the airport to Mama Joyce's diner, not because she had a meeting, but because she missed the smell of hot grits and fresh coffee. Mama Joyce spotted her immediately, walked over with a plate of her usual, and slid into the booth across from her. "You looked good up there," she said, pouring syrup on her own pancake without asking. "Fierce, clean, like you belonged." Maya smiled. "It didn't feel real until I stepped off the stage." Joyce leaned back. "You do know you've become something of a symbol, right?" "I don't want to be a symbol." "Good. Symbols fade." She paused. "You're something better. You're a shift." Maya swallowed a mouthful of eggs, then asked softly, "You ever wonder if it's too much, carrying this expectation?" Joyce chuckled. "Every day. But I also remember, the burden is proof you're still walking. And if you're still walking, you're not done." That afternoon, Maya met with Jacob back at Stanton Holdings. He'd asked for her thoughts on a new initiative partnering with local community colleges to offer internships to students from low-income neighborhoods. As he spoke, Maya glanced at a whiteboard in the corner of the room. Scribbled across it were 2 phrases, short-term PR and long-term equity. She walked over, erased short-term PR, and circled the second line twice. "If we do this," she said, "we don't cherry-pick the top 10. We take the ones who've been overlooked, the ones who don't interview well, but build trust like bricklayers, the ones who show up late sometimes but never quit." Jacob nodded slowly. "We'll build the infrastructure. You pick the people." "I already have a list," she said. He looked at her. You ever plan on sleeping again? She smirked. Rest is for legacies. I'm still laying bricks. That night, Maya stayed late. Not at the office, but at the East Point Library. She met with 3 students who'd reached out after reading her Legacy Stories series online. They didn't want autographs. They brought folders, business ideas, non-profit models, poems. She read every word, asked every question, told each of them, "You matter, not when someone says so. Right now." By the time she got home, her phone was buzzing with a message from Connor, the junior strategist she'd mentored for months. Check email. Urgent. Maya opened her inbox. A forwarded link. CNN breaking news. White House announces new, workforce reimagined, Counsel Maya William, named as senior advisor. She stared at the screen, not with shock, not with fear, with calm, because when you walk long enough in the dark, you don't panic when the spotlight hits. You speak, and then you use it to light the way for someone else. 3 months later, Maya Williams stood on the steps of Stanton Holdings' newly renovated downtown campus, beneath a banner that read, "Welcome, Cohort 1 Equity Rising Fellowship." The sun poured down across the marble, catching the faces of 60 young people filing through the doors, all of them first-generation scholars, formerly incarcerated leaders, GED graduates, and immigrants whose resumes had never made it past keyword filters. Inside, the once sterile training floor had been transformed, walls painted with murals designed by community artists, meeting spaces renamed after historical changemakers, Parks, Douglas, Chavez, Truth, and at the center of it all, a modest stage with a single podium. Maya stepped onto it in silence. She didn't need to ask for their attention. She already had it. "When I walked into this building for the first time," she began, "I was bringing water to someone who didn't think I had a name." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. "Today, I welcome you not as guests, not as interns, not as second chances, but as the architects of where this company, and this country, are going next." "Oh." She paused, eyes sweeping across the room, landing on faces brimming with something too big to call hope. "Your presence here is not symbolic, it's structural." The applause was steady, heartfelt, but Maya's voice didn't rise to meet it. She let her words remain calm, deliberate the way thunder doesn't need to shout to be heard. After the ceremony, Jacob Stanton met her on the roof. The skyline was pinking at the edges, and a soft breeze carried the hum of city traffic upward. "You know," he said, holding 2 glasses of iced tea, "I used to think legacy was about buildings and billion-dollar valuations." Maya took the glass and sipped quietly. "Now?" she asked. He smiled. "Now I think it's about the stories people tell when you're not in the room." They stood in companionable silence. Then Jacob added, "You're going to DC next week." "I know. Are you ready?" She looked out at the city. "I don't think readiness is a point you arrive at. I think it's a choice you keep making. Every day." He nodded. "Still thank you for not walking away when you could have." Maya turned to him. "I didn't stay for you. I stayed for the girl who used to clean these windows at night and whisper ideas into the glass." She didn't know if anyone would ever hear her, but she spoke anyway. Back at her apartment that evening, Maya opened a package that had arrived earlier, no return address. Inside was a framed poem, printed on thick paper, the same one the high school boy had written and handed her all those months ago. At the bottom, a new line had been added in blue ink. "Your voice gave mine permission." Maya held the frame against her chest for a moment, then placed it beside her front door, where it would be the last thing she saw each morning. The next day, before boarding the plane to Washington, she stopped by Mama Joyce's diner, still open, still humming with life. Joyce brought her a plate of eggs and toast, slid into the booth, and said nothing for a long time. Then, "They don't know what's coming, do they?" Maya grinned. "Number, but they will." Joyce reached into her apron pocket and handed Maya a worn envelope. Inside was a note, 4 simple lines, written in careful script. "Speak like your mother is listening. Stand like your grandmother is watching. Walk like the floor remembers your footsteps. And when you lead, make it so they can't forget." When Maya stepped onto the White House campus that Monday morning, she wasn't there to prove anything. She wasn't there for photos. She wasn't there for decoration. She walked in with a folder tucked under her arm, filled with proposals authored by people whose names had never seen a letterhead. She walked in with a list of legislation that needed to be rewritten not for better votes, but for fairer futures. She walked in with a clear voice and a steady spine, already composing the words she'd deliver to the council. That afternoon, as she sat before senators, secretaries, and skeptics, she remembered her mother signing that lease all those years ago. She remembered the slam of eviction papers. The sting of being told brilliance didn't come from neighborhoods like hers. And she began. "We are not the exception," she said. "We are the untold rule. We are not broken pieces stitched into systems. We are the blueprint. And from this day forward, we won't just be included. We'll be written in from the start." There was no applause. Not yet. Only silence. The kind that comes when people realize the ground beneath them is shifting. And Maya smiled, because she knew once they heard her, they could never unhear her again.